This episode is a French to English translation of our original podcast. We've done our best to adapt cultural references, but you may notice the occasional unusual phrasing or wordplay, which may not land quite the same. Thanks for your understanding. Welcome to In the Eye of Cyber, the podcast that gives voice to digital players. I'm Anna-Laure de la Rivière, Communications Director at Gatewatcher. Today, I'm hosting Vincent Trély, President and founder of the APSSIS, the Association for Health Information Systems Security. As you've guessed, we're going to talk today about cybersecurity applied to the healthcare world. Find all our episodes on our website, www.gatewatcher.com. If you like what we do, don't forget to subscribe to In the Eye of Cyber so you don't miss the next episode. Enjoy! Vincent Trély, hello.
Hello, Anne-Laure.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. So, as usual in this podcast, we always start with a brief introduction of our guest. Then, Vincent, you are today President and founder of APSSIS, which you created in 2010. You have also been CIO and CISO in several university hospitals, director and expert consultant in a digital health strategy consulting firm. And today, you head both APSSIS and a consulting firm specialised in digital and health. A very rich background, a full career. What originally motivated you to get involved in cybersecurity?
Cybersecurity is a long story. In 1997, I finished my studies at an engineering school, the CNAM, the Engineering School of CNAM, which we also called the Cyber, coincidentally. And at that time, my goal was simple: to return home. To Le Mans, in Sarthe. There was Mutuelles du Mans Assurances, and they happened to be looking for an end-of-studies intern. I ended up in the Information Systems Security Department of the MMA group, and that's how it all began. So I spent 3 years learning the trade. At the time, we still talked about computer security. A little later, at AXA, we started talking about information systems security. Then I continued at Deutsche Bank, then in the automotive industry, and finally in the hospital sector. I always followed the evolution of concepts around information security, cybersecurity. Even when I evolved toward CIO positions, as you mentioned, I kept this fiber, this passion for security. And when I arrived in healthcare, as a hospital CIO, I noticed there was a void. Nobody was really talking about these subjects. That's where the idea to create APSSIS was born, as well as the first National Congress on Cybersecurity in the health sector, organized in Le Mans. That's a bit of the story.
So, you founded APSSIS in 2010 to address the cyber issues and challenges associated with the healthcare world. Concretely, what are APSSIS's main missions?
Well, the initial missions haven't really evolved much. The goal was to bring together forces and actors, that is, clearly the CISOs, the information systems security managers who are scattered across the 3,000 public and private hospitals in France, with different positions in the hierarchy, with different possibilities for action. There were some at the time, but they didn't exist everywhere. There were many hospitals that didn't have this function. And then to bring them together, to federate them, to create events that also allow the community to gather. This community consists of institutions, the legislator, ANSSI, etc. And then there are the regions, the ARS, the GRADES, French Regional Support Group for e-health development, in health, the health development support groups, and then obviously public and private health establishments, since they have the same issues. So these missions were there. We publish a lot, we provide expert opinions in the sector, and then we meet 2 or 3 times a year to carry a message and exchange with major actors, whether technological or institutional.
And what are the key topics that APSSIS is most mobilised on today? If I say healthcare cybersecurity, what do you tell me?
Well, clearly APSSIS has progressed along with the cyber topic in healthcare. So the cyber topic in healthcare, before 2014, there were a few dozen people on the territory who were concerned about it, and ultimately APSSIS identified them and we brought them together. And then 2014 is a big step, a first state program called Digital Hospital, which offers €500 million to hospitals. To access this funding program, hospitals must respect and fulfill prerequisites. And in these prerequisites we have existence of a security policy, existence of a business continuity plan, existence of a charter for good use of digital technologies, existence of a risk analysis. And there we enter the topic. That is, we start appointing CISOs, we start deploying security policies, and there APSSIS will naturally gain momentum. We have more and more members, more and more people coming to share how they do it, whether they do it at the level of 1 hospital or 10 hospitals within the framework of hospital territorial groups. And then all this gains momentum until 2019, when the first cyber incidents that hit major French establishments, Rouen University Hospital, APHP in Paris, and then obviously Dax, Villefranche-sur-Saône, Oloron. Finally, everything we've seen in recent years, sometimes very mediatized, caused the entire political chain to seize the subject, from the Minister of Health to the President of the Republic, who gave a speech on the subject of cybersecurity in health in February 2021 and announced the implementation of quite historic action plans and resources.
What really caught your attention about the healthcare sector? Because the creation of APSSIS in 2010, and then you say that awareness of cybersecurity issues in the healthcare sector really came in 2014. So you were well ahead. How did you see or anticipate that you would have a big issue in the healthcare sector?
So when I took over the direction of information systems and medico-technical departments, that's also fascinating. It's part of the answer to your question. Medico-technical departments are pharmacy, biology, and medical imaging. I took this position in 2007, and so I spent 3 years already understanding how healthcare works. Because it's quite complicated, I started rolling out a fairly classic master plan with deployment of a computerized patient record. It's not very classic, but these are somewhat rock and roll projects when you have to, at some point, deploy a medical EHR to 4,000 healthcare users, doctors, nurses, nursing assistants, all transitioning from paper to computers. It's quite a workout. And we clearly see that security is a topic, but it's not identified as something living. At some point, you need to concentrate intelligence and resources, so that's somewhat where it comes from. And then during this period, I felt that the healthcare world, I wasn't going to leave it because I found it extremely endearing. It's somewhere, if you bring me back a bit to my story and my path in healthcare, there's something, even though obviously my job is a support job, and absolutely not front office with patients, seeing all this energy deployed everywhere to try to do good, it might be a bit naive what I'm saying, but there are moments when it did me good, at 35 to 40 years old, to arrive in a sector where I found meaning quite easily. I came out of it, and with the 15 years of vision, of skills that I was able to acquire in this sector, there's no reason for me to leave it now.
I understand. Indeed, it's an extremely virtuous sector. These are heart-driven professions. So we ask ourselves the question, why would someone want to attack and have the desire to attack a sector that is so important and indispensable for all of society? But we'll come back to that later. I wanted to ask you, today, what makes the healthcare sector particularly vulnerable in terms of threats? Are there specific threats, and why is this sector particularly targeted?
So, the healthcare sector is at the heart of all sorts of usual cyber issues. Let me explain. Cyber espionage? We spy on each other between states. That's perfectly known. World champions in all categories, the Americans, extraordinary intelligence agencies, the NSA. We have the Russians, obviously, the British, the Chinese, the Israelis. We spy. It's not new. We can quite imagine that research work from countries ahead in all medical aspects interests everyone. So the healthcare sector, like nuclear, like major industrial sectors, is a sector that deserves all the attention of our friends or our enemies. Because there, we have great researchers. We have great researchers everywhere in France, in university hospital centers, in institutes like Pasteur, in university hospitals. We talked a lot during the pandemic about the one in Marseille. We have big brains thinking about medications, treatments, etc. So there's this cyber espionage that by essence doesn't manifest too much, but that the state is concerned about. Then we simply have cybercrime, and we'll come back to that later. Hospitals are no exception. So when computer pirates launch large infection nets of ransomware, well, they're going to catch cities, they're going to catch SMEs, SMIs, and hospitals. We'll come back to that. Don't believe that all attacks on hospitals are targeted. Very few are targeted. Hospitals fall by chance into the net. The consequences are very serious. But ultimately, it's often the result of chance. So cybercrime. We're going to block a hospital, we're going to ransom it. After all, if an SME pays, why wouldn't a hospital pay? The level of disorganization is such that they'll give up. And history shows us that in the period of major cyber attacks on American hospitals, Between 2007 and 2015, approximately, many American hospitals paid ransoms. By the Americans, they are much more pragmatic than us. At some point, there's a guy who arrives and says, "How much does it cost us if it's blocked for 10 days? Someone answers, $10 million. How much does the pirate want? 1 million. Well, we pay. There you go. We obviously don't take this strategy. Then there's health data that has interest. So there, we're in another form of cybercrime. I'm going to go plunder a hospital's data because it's very interesting to have decades of data on people's health behaviors, whether children, elderly people, etc. What medications do they take? What treatments do they follow? What are the results? And then simply all their identity information. Name, first name, social security number, all that has particular interest. We then have cyber activists who can also use digital health networks to publicize their cause. Blocking the Paris Emergency Medical Service regulation system at noon, that's the 8 p.m. news tonight on TV. So there are also risks from people who would want, at some point, to conduct actions with strong media impact, and who could also use the health system. So you see that it's at the heart of it. We talk a lot about cybercrime right now because what's mediatized are the ransomwares that ultimately shut down Corbeil-Essonnes, that shut down Versailles, with cascading consequences that are absolutely dramatic for the hospital.
Sure.
But ultimately, if I return to your question about the healthcare sector in general, it's at the heart of cyber dynamics. And at the same time as all this I just told you is happening, it's in full digital and technological transformation with strong needs to open up. That is, the hospital is anything but a fortress.
I wanted to come back to ransomware attacks on hospitals. What you're saying is that most of the time it's chance. I'm thinking, for example, of Mignot Hospital. It wasn't necessarily voluntary. The cyber attacker who attacked Mignot, it was actually chance. He cast a net on many addresses, etc. And actually, the hospital is collateral damage.
Yes, exactly. The hospital is collateral damage most of the time.
How does it work exactly? Can you explain to us a bit how it works? For example, with Lockbit. There was a franchise that made piracy teams available to pirates. And then after, we exchange. Lockbit says that the pirate must sign a charter in which he must not attack hospitals. And despite everything, there are errors. There are things that happen anyway. Can you explain to us in a bit more detail how it works?
So there, you're addressing two extremely interesting subjects. The first subject is the platformization of cyber attacks. That's quite a subject. Until now, we were used to when we faced sophisticated attacks that caused a lot of damage, often we were dealing with very competent people on the other side. Real hackers, in the sense who have been doing this for 20 years. Today, with RAS, Ransomware as a Service, we have somewhere people who say to themselves, we make available to you a platform where you can use these tools. And these tools consist of cryptoviruses, possible propagation routines, etc. And you will give us 10, 20, 25% of the profits you make via our platform. As pirates, it seems, have for some a form of ethics. Well, the Lockbit people said at some point, if you use our platform, you commit to having a sort of code. And this code consists of not attacking a certain number of targets, particularly hospitals. And this led to disputes between pirates at some point, where we saw that one of the cyber attacks on Corbeil hospitals was Lockbit. And there was score settling between pirates saying, there, you didn't respect the charter, etc., it's not good. Well, after, how does it work in real life? In real life, don't forget that the pirate has two means of deploying his virus. Either a very large email campaign, that is, he's going to retrieve somewhere, or he's built a database of 1 million, 10 million, 50 million emails. He's going to attach phishing to something saying, you need to click, etc. And you're going to have spam that goes out with the virus. And so a certain number of users will find themselves with the thing in their mailbox. Some will realize it's not right, and others won't, and will click. And there, indeed, we can fall on a hospital, we can fall on a town hall or an SME. And then the second scenario is detecting a computer flaw in an information system. Let's take the example of a hospital, and at that moment, the pirate will conduct an action to introduce his virus into the information system.
Okay. And so what also interested me to know was in the context of health data that is really targeted. There, for once, it's voluntary piracy against, for example, a hospital, as you were talking about earlier. So the cyber attacker will voluntarily plunder health data. Who will buy this data afterward? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So indeed, either via his cryptovirus that now contains a data exfiltration function prior to encrypting information system data, or another attack technique aimed solely at siphoning data, the pirate will find himself with a large amount of data. And indeed, which will contain various hospital reports and series of information that may be of interest to all sorts of international groups, whether pharmaceutical groups, insurance groups, or others. So there's health data. What's going to happen? Well, first, the pirate will try to attempt the move again with the hospital that didn't want to pay the cryptovirus ransom by telling him, well, now I have the data of 100,000 of your patients. I'm going to spread them on the internet. You're going to have lots of trouble with justice. Are you sure you don't want to pay? Well, that's a form of blackmail. If the hospital continues to say no, the pirate will put a data kit up for sale on the dark web. He'll more or less document it and say, for example, I have 350,000 medical documents, 20% cancerous, 35% children, and he'll put a price on it in cryptocurrency, and people will buy that. There you go. Data brokers will buy that to possibly then manufacture slightly more interesting cohorts that can be bought under the table by all sorts of organizations that are interested in having data, mass data, and qualified, documented data, etc. And then, as we've seen in the context of certain attacks, if really no one wants his stuff, the pirate will resell piecemeal the social security codes, email addresses, identities. That is, your identity, unlaw, name, first name, email address, phone number, address, that's worth €2. There you go. And so if you've stolen 100,000, you still have 200,000 euros to sell, simply with somewhat precise identification data.
Are there organizations that order piracy of this type of data?
I think yes, but obviously it's not done like that. When you want something illegal, you have protocols for that. But you don't order it on the internet.
No, of course there's the dark web for that, I imagine.
And there are necessarily networks that make that information that was taken somewhere and that interests someone. But there's a whole transmission chain with commission chains that make that at the end, the person has the info they want. But like when I was leaving school more than 25 years ago now, it's hard to say that, haha. But we were already discussing Airbus problems that had to protect its data against attacks from offices that aimed to give their plans back to Boeing.
Sure.
In the context of economic warfare, where, of course, on major technological advances, all countries have an interest in knowing where others stand, on nuclear, on armament, on... That's why in France we've had for a very long time. Anyway, we have weaknesses on the side of territorial communities, hospitals, etc. We mustn't forget that we have strengths and that our strategic companies have been particularly monitored and protected for more than 20 years. Besides, we hear less. It's not frequent that we hear that our major CAC-40 companies are brought to their knees by a cyber attack.
Yes, sure.
They've suffered, but they have means, technologies, maturity. It's a bit less like Swiss cheese.
Yes, of course. And so you were talking earlier about ethics among cyber attackers. And indeed, we've seen cyber attackers make a mea culpa following the blocking of a hospital in Canada. We've also seen the International Committee of the Red Cross call for the creation of a digital emblem to deter cyber attackers from targeting protected infrastructures like hospitals, somewhat like what's already done with the Red Cross symbol placed on a hospital roof in the real world. Do we really see a certain ethics emerging among cyber attackers?
Cyber attackers represent the world's youth, quite simply. So you have at some point youth from all sorts of countries who at some point say to themselves, me, I'm going to be a cyber pirate. But once they leave with this idea in mind, they have other causes. And there are some who are environmentalists, there are some who are ultra-globalists. Well, so we're going to have among pirates human groups, some who will say to themselves, but us, it's absolutely not a question of attacking hospitals, of attacking a certain number of virtuous companies. On the other hand, we're going to attack representatives of big capital, the GAFAs, etc., and there we're going to have a field day because we think they're unbalancing. Or we're going to attack Total. I imagine that Total today, I'm pretty sure that Total's cyber teams are a bit stressed since the announcement of record profits. Because indeed, suddenly, Total becomes a target for all sorts of people on the planet who say, stop oil. And among all these people, obviously, we have pirates and we have groups of pirates, and we have some who will maybe give each other a call saying, we need to do something, just like those who went to spray paint on artworks. So we're going to find among pirates a sociology that ranges from the one with no scruples, who ultimately only seeks to bring money into his bank account, and who ultimately could be seen as the one who monitors his piracy platform remotely, and who sees dollars being cashed, but he doesn't even know what he hacked and who's paying him, Actually, his virus works, he sees it's paying, etc. And then we have others who will attach their piracy to certain causes and therefore forbid themselves from interacting on certain systems, and privilege contrarily cyber attacks more on others. And they don't get along with each other and will maybe even sometimes fight each other. And there you go, it's an ecosystem in itself, representative of a somewhat general sociology.
But ultimately, when we see the figures from the Observatory of Information System Security incident reports, the health and medico-social sector would represent 40% of cybersecurity incidents reported in France in 2021. So we tell ourselves that there are still quite a few cyber attackers with no scruples, as you say. And can we ultimately say that today concerns within a hospital converge with those of administrations, territorial communities and businesses, and even industries?
But ultimately, when we see the figures from the Observatory of Information System Security incident reports, the health and medico-social sector would represent 40% of cybersecurity incidents reported in France in 2021. So we tell ourselves that there are still quite a few cyber attackers with no scruples, as you say. And can we ultimately say that today concerns within a hospital converge with those of administrations, territorial communities and businesses, and even industries? Concerns converge in the sense that the threat is the same. That is, blocking the production tool, data exfiltration, blackmail, etc. We're in the same set. Healthcare has this particularity, it's that we're playing with people's lives. We must not forget that today, a hospital disorganized by a cyber attack means transfers of intensive care patients and premature babies in neonatal ICU 50 kilometers away, in another hospital. It's dangerous. The stopping of all monitoring functions in an emergency service, and the emergency service that starts telling the local population, "We can't understand anyone anymore. Please go 50 or 80 kilometers away because we can't anymore. We have a real problem." We have a problem that we won't necessarily find with the same impacts in other sectors. If the city is cyber-attacked, okay, there are big problems. Maybe there will be salary payment problems, maybe there are management problems, tender calls, maybe there are management problems of all kinds of schedules, even some automated traffic lights or others. We're not at the same level as a hospital where we still have people. If you're at the hospital, it's because things aren't going well. If there are machines around you, it's so things get better. And healthcare professionals are totally integrated with digital technologies. They are quickly now totally disorganized if it doesn't work anymore.
Of course, of course. In the latest CSIN, French Club of Information Security Experts, Barometer on Corporate Cybersecurity for 2023, they say that the use of NDR technologies has increased by 7 to 8 percentage points compared to last year. Proof that NDR technologies interest more and more companies who use them increasingly due to their high efficiency. In your opinion, what is the added value of a solution like NDR? And there you go. Especially, what can it bring for a hospital in strengthening their cyber protection?
The cyber protection of an establishment, it's above all a policy, governance, a security management system, taking into account all the regulatory part, obviously, a continuous awareness part to also bring people into the security dynamic. As I say from time to time, make them a tiny bit paranoid, a bit more, but a bit. And then obviously behind we have a technical component with tools that it's obviously necessary to buy, deploy, master or rent. If we go with cloud-based systems, and as you specify, we need to take care of workstations. So with complete security of the professional's environment. Professionals in mobility also need to work everywhere. Who says who moves around a territory that increasingly demands being able to access pretty much everything their local office contains in mobility conditions? You're going to have all the security of assets, servers, permanent monitoring of behaviors, all the highly anticipated new tools, powered by artificial intelligence, which also allow real-time analysis of the behaviors of a network or technical architecture, and compare it with models, stability models, and be able to report deviations. All this is being deployed. All these technologies are being deployed. So it's not since yesterday, it's been about 10 years already, but there's a clear acceleration on a whole set of XDR, EDR technologies, privileged account monitoring probes, network monitoring, SOC. It can be more globally software aggregation to move towards SOCs. We're right in the middle of it, and it's going to be extremely dynamic in the years to come.
Yes, of course. So, beyond the technical part, we've clearly understood that the healthcare sector is really particularly vulnerable. I'd like to discuss with you more concretely cyber risk management in this sector. I think it's a somewhat particular sector with healthcare personnel who may be less trained on cybersecurity issues, or for whom it's not a priority. Obviously, the priority is health, care, patient care. So how do we mobilize all healthcare personnel in a sector that's becoming increasingly open and connected? We're thinking, of course, about the future, about city medicine, about opening hospitals to external medicine, etc.
Clearly, that's it. That's the issue. One of the big issues, and for several reasons. The first reason is that, and good for us, a hospital is like a land of care bears and benevolence. The doors are open, the windows are open, people come and go because they're visiting their loved ones. So it's the complete opposite of a company with badges at reception, guards searching bags, designated officers, mandatory access. We're in something that's often right in the heart of the city, and which is a place where, by principle, we don't have a security dimension for protecting things. So that's already a first element. I mean, when you work at Dassault Aviation, or you're in the army, or you're at Thales, from day one, you've clearly understood that you can't forget your badge, can't disrespect the security policy. Well, you understand where you are. You're in a place that's closed, structured, where there are services working on developments of things so crucial that employees don't even talk to each other, etc. The hospital is the complete opposite. So the culture of health risk exists, the culture of patient risk is there. But the culture of digital risk, we started from practically zero. Indeed, we often made an error. During the first phase of hospital computerization, often due to weakness towards a medical staff that really wanted this not to disturb care processes at all, it's quite possible that we placed turned-on computers everywhere. And a few years later, I experienced this period in 2007, deploying the computerized patient file in Le Mans. We told the doctors, come on, we're going to stop this. In fact, that is, no more free access PCs now, it's login, password per person, we're going to deploy computers. You don't have the right to lend passwords to your interns or to anyone else. And then there's regulation. Regulation requires the doctor to validate certain things, not done in real life. He's had his secretary do that for 20 years, etc. So there you have it. Security also brought at some point a number of constraints that the system wasn't used to, with fairly limited power from IT departments. Because when you have a head of obstetric surgery department who tells you, well, no, actually, we're not going to use 12-character passwords because we don't have time to do that. So either you get rid of all that, or the CEO comes, you negotiate, and so to respond and finish on this point, all this is progressing. All this is progressing through awareness campaigns. About people's privacy, too, there's a positive impact because at some point, everyone can see that the bank now requires you to have validation with an SMS code, all sorts of protocols that in daily life bring security. And so it's a little more easily accepted in the professional environment. So you have to get them on board. It's not a population, as you say, that obeys orders. Starting tomorrow, it's like this. Or not. So you have to convince. And as you also point out, you have to be careful that security at some point doesn't also disrupt the necessary fluidity of care activities. So there are technologies to think about. Login password in dermatology or geriatrics works very, very well. Login password with PC shutdown after 30 seconds in emergency rooms. We have nothing. That doesn't work at all. So we can also, depending on sectors, say, careful, there. As soon as they approach the PC, they need to be authenticated right away. They're connected. We can't because they're going to do that 400 times a day, so we can't ask them 400 times to insert a smart card. We have to find other means, while there are other sectors where the doctor connects twice a day to make prescriptions, etc. And there, he doesn't have the same fluidity challenges. That's kind of what I mean about that.
Right. And indeed there is, in the long term, there will be the opening of hospitals to private medicine with online apps, which will be increasingly open to the outside. We have to take this into account.
There's that too, absolutely. All the interaction with the patient who is now at the center of a care pathway. And so this care pathway that starts with their GP, who then possibly sends them to see a specialist, and then there's a hospital stay, and then possibly then there's a rest stay in follow-up and adaptation care, then there's medical follow-up. And all this has the objective of being coordinated. That means that indeed our health system must absolutely not close itself off and compartmentalize. It's made, on the contrary, to open up and allow exchange between professionals.
So, do we need to adapt the cybersecurity sector to healthcare? Or do we need to adapt the healthcare sector to cybersecurity?
A bit of both. That is, you have to take at some point a hospital information system. Its rooms, its cables, its servers, its directories, its applications. So we could say that if the hospital were a bank or industry, etc., that is, the technological means to protect a hospital information system are globally the same as any other sector. After that, it's the way of doing security that will need to be customized a bit to this sector, by understanding its expectations, by understanding its points of vigilance too, and then adapting to this environment that's in permanent reorganization, that moves, etc. So it's the same thing as everywhere, with a necessity of acceptance and consideration of this cyber risk and means to protect against it. But adapted to this decentralized system, very focused on its patient, and which considers that everything that disrupts the relationship with patients is at least confusing or a waste of time. So we have to recalibrate all that. Now, what we've experienced and what we've suffered, I still want to specify that the awareness is there. I don't hear anyone anymore saying there's no issue about this. Doctors are convinced of this. What those who experienced cyber attacks lived through, they told their peers what they had experienced. There's no more denial. There's been an alignment on the fact that, yes, okay, we understood. There are important things to implement, and everyone will be okay with that.
So, maybe just the final word on this awareness. Indeed, we can clearly see that the health ecosystem has become aware of cybersecurity issues. The state has also taken the measure of this subject quite a bit, with the multiplication of plans and programs. Do you think it's sufficient? Are there reasons to hope?
Yes, well, concretely, what's been happening for a little over 2 years is quite unprecedented. In the law of 24 July 2019 on the Organization and Transformation of the Health System, often referred to by its French name, Ma Santé 2022, Orientation Number 2 clearly spoke about increasing the security level of hospitals. Then, there were first phases of hospital support by APSSIS, National Cybersecurity Agency of France, for €25 million, with a ministerial task force that's meeting right now and will present its conclusions at the end of March, and means will be announced. So, yes, there's state support, but as we often say, it's catch-up somewhere. We're not in anticipation. There, we're doing catch-up. The challenge is for this to become routine, and I'd even say somewhere, the challenge is a bit above that. The digital ambitions of the French health system today are that 4 to 5% of general budgets should be dedicated to IT. We must note that we're between 1 and 2%. So the health system will also have to understand that this massive deployment of digital technologies has a cost. That the security of all this is not an option, because otherwise there will be trust problems between different actors. And simply to say, okay, well, I'm a modern hospital. I have a modern information system. It's 5% of my annual budget. It's not 1.5%.
Yes, there's still a little bit of work. Still many challenges to get through effectively to integrate the future. So the progressive movement towards cloud services, the challenges of health data sharing, the promises of artificial intelligence, medical big data. As you said in your cyber column, the inclusion of the patient at the centre of their care pathway. Indeed, there are still enormous things to put in place, but in any case, you've given us reasons to hope. Thank you very much, Vincent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to those listening to us. I hope this special episode on cybersecurity in the healthcare sector pleased you. If so, don't hesitate to share it on social media and follow our news on Gatewatcher's LinkedIn and Twitter pages. Remember to subscribe to the In the Eye of Cyber podcast and give us 5 stars on Apple Podcast. See you very soon in the Eye of Cyber.